Hey, Bureau, have you seen my daggers? I could have sworn I left them on the table downstairs.
There may have been a small incident at the merchant's shop today. Birodar had nothing to do with it, of course. This one studied without pause all day long. All day. Certainly Biro never left this house. Not even once.
That's why that magistrate I ran into asked about you. You gotta start keeping a lower profile. This isn't elsewhere. I don't know anybody in the West Weald. I can't pull your paws out of the fire here. Well, never mind that now. I've got a build video to do. I guess I'll have to use this bow since I can't find my daggers. Hey guys, sorry about that, but keeping Bureau Dar out of trouble is turning into a full-time job. Anyway, today I have a Magica Pet Sorc for you that uses a bow and two-handed sword. Actually, the weapons are completely flexible on this build, especially on the front bar, where it's just a drop-in that doesn't require any skill changes. I ran this setup with a bow, staff, and daggers on the front, so use whatever you want if you end up running this. For purposes of the video, though, I'm going to stick with the bow, especially since I seem to have misplaced my daggers. I need to check the local pawn shops. By the way, this isn't a meta build. Instead, I do builds which I think will be more useful to the average player of the game. And I base that on what I find useful as an average player of the game, using myself as a sample size of 1. So typically, my builds use static rotations and gear that's easy to get, with a few minor exceptions. But having made those concessions, I still like my builds to work well, and I have confidence that every build I upload can get you through even the hardest vet DLC dungeons and even veteran trials. But having said that, I have to acknowledge that my builds are put together differently than a build intended solely for organized trials groups. There are things I include that you wouldn't put in a trials build. There are many skills, buffs, sets, and so forth that would be redundant in that setting. And later in this video I'll talk about that because one of the gear sets I'm wearing wouldn't be appropriate to take into a trial, but more on that later. Alright, now that I've gotten that stuff out of the way, let's get to today's build, the Magic Archer. This is a Pet Sorc damage dealer build, and it's intended primarily for the 4-player dungeons. Okay, let's look at the character sheet.
A party. Oh, that is what this place needs. No, a banquet. With dancers, and wine, and cakes, and minstrels. Surely you must have something you want to celebrate, yes? If not, Biro will think of something.
Alright, I'll tell you what. We'll throw a party here when Gold Road launches. In the meantime, try to stay out of trouble. Let me get on with this. My character is a Khajiit, and Khajiit is a top damage dealer race, whether you're running Magica or Stamina. The Khajiit has bonuses to all 3 attributes and bonuses to all 3 recoveries as well. But what makes the Khajiit a top damage dealer race is their large 12% bonus to critical damage. As always, I encourage you guys to play the race you like the most, but I'll put the tier list up for anybody that wants that info. You can see Khajiit is right at the top along with High Elf. For my buff food, I'm using the Ghastly Eye Bowl, and they call that ice cream here on the character sheet. Big laughs. I like this food because it gives me a lot of Magica and Magica recovery. I like having that high recovery, so if I need more health, most of the time I'll do that with armor enchants rather than changing my food buff. My Mundus Stone is a thief, and that gives me extra critical chance. Up at the top of the sheet, you can see I have all 64 attribute points in Magica, and that's what you should have for a Magica damage dealer. That gives me a substantial 30,000 points of Magica. I've got 21,000 points of health, and that's above the Mendoza line, so I'm good there. Magica recovery is solid at 1,500. Spell damage is really low at 3,400, and this is one of those instances where the effect of one of my armor sets is not reflected in the character sheet. You'll see why when we get to the gear. Spell critical chance is excellent at 60%. I want to point out that all these stats here are raw, unbuffed stats, and those are going to change in combat. This build requires potions of spell power, and you'll need to level the alchemy skill line to get the medicinal use passive. Potions of spell power give me increased spell damage and increased spell crit. They'll also increase my Magica recovery and give me some Magica immediately when I use one. Okay, let's move on to my favorite part, and that's the skills. I'll start on my two-handed bar. The first thing I do on this bar is activate my Volatile Familiar special attack, which causes that little guy to fight extra hard and do extra damage. After I've done that, I use Stampede from the two-handed skill line, and this will close any gap between me and my enemy, doing damage on impact and leaving an area of damage on the ground. That damage area will give me extra weapon damage as long as an enemy stays within it. I just need a great sword with the infused trait and a weapon damage cliff, and that's exactly what I have. Now I use my new scribe skill, Bloody Smash. This is a new skill for the two-handed skill line. The scripts I've selected will give me bleed damage up front, bleed damage over time, and provide me with a minor berserk buff, increasing my damage by 5% for 20 seconds. This skill has a half-second channel time, but that extra 5% damage makes it worth it. The last skill I use is Barb Trap, which does bleed damage over time and gives me the minor force buff, increasing my critical damage by 10%. Let's not forget I have my other pet, the Twilight Matriarch, and that gives me a heal when I need one by pressing that button, plus it does good damage to my enemy. Last on this bar I have the Mages Guild Ultimate Ice Comet slotted. This is a great all-around ultimate, but it really shines in fight where the boss moves around a lot. That's because this targets the enemy, not the ground, and if that enemy moves before impact, the comet will follow them. And this skill dishes out its damage more quickly than the Storm Atronach. But, having said that, the Storm Atro does more damage in a stationary fight, so that's what I used in the fight you'll see shortly. Okay, that wraps up the two-handed bar. Now I could have run a staff or a bow on my back bar just as easily, but that would require a couple skill changes. If any of you guys have questions on this stuff, ask away in the comments section. Okay, let's look at my bow bar. Why are we stopping here? We're stopping here because I just got this house and I want to check it out. I have some business out here and it's on the way. Look at that drop. That's a doozy. Don't take a bad step there. That's a hell of a long way down. Please slip. Please slip. One push and my days of babysitting this guy are over. I can't do it. Alright, let's get going. The first skill I use on my bow bar is Daedric Prey, and that increases the damage of my pets and puts an explosive rune on the enemy. That rune explodes after 6 seconds, and during that 6 seconds I'm going to use my spammable attack. And my spammable attack is one of the new scribe skills, Shocking Soul. Shocking Soul does shock damage, as you might guess from the name. What Shocking Soul also does is applies major breach to the enemy, reducing its armor by 5,000 points. On your screen you can see the scripts I've selected to make this custom skill. This skill has a range of 28 meters, which makes it perfect to use with a bow. After using Shocking Soul 6 times, I'll cast Daedric Prey again. Then I'll use Shocking Soul 6 more times and cast Daedric Prey a final time before I leave this bar. I also have my 2 pet skills slotted on this bar because otherwise when I swap bars they would disappear. Before I forget, I need to mention my Execute skill, and that's Mage's Wrath from the Sorcerer's Toolkit. I'll stop using my spammable and start using Mage's Wrath when my enemy is below 20% health. Finally on this bar I have the Fighter's Guild Ultimate, and that's Flawless Dawnbreaker, and that's slotted for the passive boost to damage. Alright, it's time to finish traveling to my destination so I can put all this together with a quick fight. So the build did 51,000 points of damage, and that's right up there with the other builds I've been giving you. That's going to take you anywhere you want to go. I did use the Zon Monster Helm again on this one, but I noticed it didn't proc very well. But some of the crits were pretty strong, so I'm going to call it a wash. I did use the Greater Storm Atronach here, and there's a rumor floating around that the Charged Atro may be stronger now. That wasn't my experience, so I stuck with the Greater Atro. Shocking Soul worked out really well as a spammable attack, and even though I stayed close in this fight, Shocking Soul actually has a range of 28 meters. Once I used Stampede and dropped Barb Trap at the boss's feet, I could have backed off when I switched to the bow bar, but I didn't want to pull the boss out of the ground AoEs. Now I'm going to speak to a topic that comes up periodically. I sometimes get asked what my builds parse on a trials dummy, and I'm not trying to be rude when I reply that I have no idea. I don't do those parses for 2 reasons. First, I just don't have the time to do them. Parsing on a 21 million point raid dummy numerous times for every build I make would be an impossible task. Second, and more importantly, I don't think those parses are useful to my audience. When you and a friend pick up a couple more players in the group finder and you pug Fungal Grotto, nobody in that group is going to hit a number anything like the numbers you see advertised on YouTube thumbnails. On the other hand, the number I give you in this short boss fight is going to translate very well to that group dungeon experience. This build can hit 51,000 points and higher on a group dungeon boss that's relatively stationary. If you're new to the game, this number is a realistic number that you can shoot for. If you're a veteran, you can compare this to numbers you're getting on similar bosses. There are many other reasons why I think my audience is better served by me fighting overland bosses rather than doing a parse on the Trials dummy, but I'm going to leave it at that. Long-winded explanations of the differences between parsing on a dummy and fighting a real boss will have to wait for another day. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's head back home and have a look at the gear.
There might have been a misinterpretation of this one's intentions today, at the savings and loan, with the banker. That was definitely not Biro's hand, in the vault drawer, with his fingers around a fistful of gold. Not in the least.
You know, sometimes I can't believe we're from the same litter, and what sucks most of all is Mom loved you more than any of us. I'm sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, gear. On my front bar I have a bow of the Orr's Wrath and the precise trait with the fire damage glyph. Orr's Wrath is a crafted set from the High Isle, and you can make it yourself, have someone make it for you, or buy it from guild traders. They had precise bows in Vivec City for 100 grand. Go up to Vardenfell and get one. On my back bar I have the Maelstrom's Perfected Greatsword, and that comes from the arena of the same name. If you don't have this yet, run Orr's Wrath here. You want the infused trait and a weapon damage glyph, and that's going to help boost your weapon damage, not just on the back bar, but also on your main bar. You have to use the Stampede skill to get that buff. If you run a staff back here, use Wall of Elements and you get the same effect. With a bow, run Endless Hail. Make sure you have the infused trait and a weapon damage glyph. If you run these other weapons, you'll have to come up with a replacement skill for Bloody Smash 2. That's strictly with two-handed. You guys saw I used the Zon Monster Helm, and that comes from Scalecaller Peak. That can be a little rough, so run whatever monster helm you have if you don't have Zon. If you really want to be ranged, I'd try Stormfist. That's a great option here. That'll proc really well, and it'll help you stay out of trouble by giving you more stamina recovery. Now we come to my other 5-piece set, and that's Grave Inevitability. This set comes from the Graven Deep Dungeon, and this could be a little tough to get, so I'm kind of breaking my rule here. But I've only got body pieces, so you can run the dungeon on normal, and you don't even have to finish. You don't need any weapons, so you don't have to do the final boss. This set will give you the Major Force buff, which increases your critical damage by a whopping 20%. Typically, you get Major Force from another player in your group using Warhorn, but in small groups, the uptime on that is poor generally. Imagine, though, if you could have uptimes approaching 100%. Well, with this set, that can happen. But this set is the one I referred to in the beginning of the video when I said there was a set I wouldn't take into trials. In that setting, you're likely to get a lot of Warhorns, especially in organized groups, and the bonus from this set would be wasted. So if that's where you want to go, I would use another set here. But for 4-player groups and dungeons, this is going to be pretty strong. My body pieces here are all light except for one medium piece, and all the traits are divines. My jewelry is bloodthirsty with spell damage glyphs, and if you can't make these pieces, you can buy them from guild traders. I'd try to see if a friend can make them for you first. No friends? Join a guild. Instant friends. There are a lot of guilds that bend over backwards to help new players, so never think even for a minute that you're in this alone. Alright, let's look at the champion points and try to wrap this up. The blue slottables are Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, and Wrathful Strikes. And this is actually intuitive for a change. If you have a setup with a lot of direct single target damage, you may do better with Master at Arms than Thaumaturge, and that's the case here. I'm going to give you my choices for the red slottables, which I don't normally do, but I probably should because I want to steer you away from taking Fortified. Take Celerity instead and increase your movement speed by 10%. Taking Fortify is one of the least efficient methods of damage reduction that I can think of. Looking at it on the surface, if 33,000 points of armor is a 50% reduction in damage, then Fortified is only 2.5%. If you're worried about damage reduction, give yourself the Major Resolve buff. That's a 7% reduction. Or just slot Revealing Flare from the PvP support skill line. That gives you Major Protection for a 10% reduction. That's an old tank trick. Become a Vampire. There are lots of ways to get damage reduction, and almost every one of them is better than taking Fortified. The Fortified Champion constellation is some of the worst bang for the buck in the game. Hey Bureau, I want to apologize for what I said earlier, and other stuff. At the end of the day, you're my brother, and don't worry about that thing at the bank. I went down there and straightened it out. Why don't you go ahead and send out some party invitations for the launch of Gold Road? Get that dancing girl too, whatever her name was.
Well, this one is shocked to have come into some gold recently. Scholarship pays, it seems. Dinner is on Birodar.
Ha, that's a first. Just kidding. Let's go eat. I'm starved. Well, that's it for today's build, the Magic Archer. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to crush the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. There's a fashion show at the end, followed by a fight in Cylorn, which is one of the new Zone Group dungeons coming with Gold Road. That's a spoiler. I actually owe you an apology, because without any warning, I gave you a piece of that fight in the intro. If you don't want to see this fight in its entirety before Gold Road is released and you'd rather experience it yourself next month, stop the video during the fashion show. I changed one skill on my bar, and that was to include Vault, which is one of the new scribed skills. I used this extensively in the fight to stay away from the boss, because if he hits me one time, I'm dead. When I said the other dungeon boss in this zone is the toughest one ever, I couldn't have been more mistaken. This guy, Vicor Brazenhoof, is way harder. This fight is 7 minutes of me kiting this guy and trying not to get hit. I spend half of my time recalling my pets after they've been killed, and the other half vaulting or dodge rolling out of the way. Well, anyway, if you want to watch another brutal boss fight where I'm mostly fighting to stay alive, you can enjoy that. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel.